the political side of it, and then there's the real story.
There's a lot to unpack right there. It wasn't quite the interview I thought that was going to be. There's a reason for it. This will be officially my favorite podcast I've ever done.
Obviously, me being on Wall Street for 34 years, and the Psychic of Wallstreet, I was curious as to how you got started. It's a really interesting idea, and you've made it into a career. And I meet people all the time that say they have intuition, or they have the ability to sort of know the future, but very few last. You've lasted a long time at this, and I'm curious as to how you got started.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that actually the New Agers are harder students than the traders, for example, because as much as traders try to come up with that perfect program that's going to predict the market, which works great until it doesn't, they really understand that you don't have the time to make a well-reasoned decision, that so much of good trading is your gut response, your being able to sense a metronome and what's going on around it. So I got started in the early 80s and really not at all thinking of doing this as a profession. I was in my early 20s. And at the time, there was a lot of interest in the university community, in the defense community, in people who had what they like to term unique brains. So there was already a lot of, I came late on the scene, actually, there's some old timers, but there was a lot of research done on can a human being predict the future? Can a human being view a remote location? And so I was very young and kind of passed around to a lot of these programs, and that's really how I got started. I'd seen something on TV, and I thought that was describing these programs, and I thought, well, can't everyone do this? And indeed, my experience is everyone can. So I got started that way, and I come from 3 generations of scientists, and I went to a nerd school in New York called Stuyvesant, one of the first classes of girls that was all math and science. And word got around, and I didn't feel comfortable doing what a lot of psychics or intuitives do, which is being untrained therapists or being untrained investment counselors or being untrained anything. So basically, I just worked with people who were already competent at the things they were asking me. Nobody makes a trade on my say-so. I'm one voice. I would never tell a civilian what to do. I'm telling people who run $1 billion fund, I'm just one voice. So that's how I got started.
Yeah, I know all familiar with this, as I've worked on Wall Street for such a long time and ran hedge funds and subscribed to different services and tried to get an edge. I mean, that's obviously the most important thing is, right, try to get an edge from someone help you get an edge, et cetera. Are you still doing it right now? Because I know that, there was a little fame around, and I'm going to get some of this wrong, but the whole Brad Pitt quote about you predicting the sell-off of, I guess, the debacle of 2008, 2009.
No, it wasn't that Brad Pitt. It was a combination of things. I have a rule, which is I never make predictions on air, because no one's 100%. What if I'm wrong and someone puts their fund, someone loses their retirement? So I made a prediction on air, actually on an Irish, but I did it just because I wasn't thinking, on an Irish radio show about the market. And then I woke up in the morning and called my investment person, who's still my investment person, and said, sell everything. And she said, no, don't be crazy. The market's great. I said, you know what? I'm losing sleep. She said, you've made 30-odd%. I said, no, I'm losing sleep. Get rid of it. And so when actually this happened, there was just this confluence of different things where there was all of this stuff out there on this prediction I'd made. Because normally, I would never, except by mistake, do something like that publicly.
So Brad Pitt didn't say...
No, it wasn't Brad. Brad said, I believe in the gut, and I believe in Laura Day.
Brad Pitt says, I believe in the gut and I believe in Laura Day.
No, it was, I think it was Newsweek, or I forget who it was, I mean, this is a long time ago, who did the original article, but it was because there was actually a trail where you could see, where there was proof that they could see that I had emptied my account.
So you took all your money out of the stock market?
I took all my money out of the stock market.
Now, you should know we called Laura's financial planner at a big-name bank to confirm the details of her stock sale, and she did indeed sell her entire portfolio against the broker's advice at the height of the market.
And that I had on air predicted this completely. I mean, for me, that is the least ethical thing I've ever done, is to do something like that on air. Because if I had been wrong, I could have, and someone had listened to me, God forbid. I mean, I only work with people who are, good traders already and intuitive. All I am is maybe a view of something that they didn't realize was going on, or confirmation. But a good trader, that is the difference, I think, between other than being not too reactive and emotional, between a good trader and a one that has too many ups and downs.
Yeah, I myself paid the same guy who was a therapist for Stevie Cohen. I paid that ridiculous per hour fee. I can't remember what his name was. He had a couple books, and there is some validity to the idea that sometimes you can't see through things, and it's easier for another party to see them and maybe give you a different perspective. But
or verify your perspective. I mean, the thing is I don't take one-off clients. I've worked with my clients for 10, 20, 30 years. So, I mean, my oldest client I have worked with for more than 30 years. And I'm at a point where people are retiring and I don't do personal stuff. But it's, people, because I come from a crazy family. I want to know if I'm crazy. I want to know if I'm making something up. But when the same person employs you over a long period of time, you realize that the dialogue actually is very reaffirming, because they keep track. Believe me, they tell you your mistakes, but you're valuable enough for your hits. And again, I think that's true of good traders. A good trader doesn't never make a mistake, but a good trader is their percentage of mistakes to hits is pretty low.
I'm mesmerized that you wrote 6 books. I think that anytime someone writes that many books, they definitely have a massive circle of competence. It's a testament. You can write one and maybe never show back up, but when you're on your 6th book, then you really, you're doing it for.
I just finished my 7th, actually.
Wow.
Just sent it last week.
I want to go down a route that maybe you probably don't want to go down. I have no idea whether you'll indulge me or not, but we are in a presidential cycle here, an election this year that's very. So obviously, we're not going to talk about age. I'm 54. It's not relevant.
I'm 65 in March, and I have no problem talking about age.
Well, you look great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do actually. But what I wanted to say to you is that there was a time where I think in 2007 or so, it really started for me after 9/11 as a trader guy working on a desk. I was on a Wall Street desk at the time, running a hedge fund. It was the first time that everything that I ever knew just disappeared. The market closed for 4 days. The debacle of, I worked in the World Trade Center on World Trade II prior to that. It was a really, watched some of my friends pass away. And slowly after that, I've been whittled down into a belief system. And when I didn't think things could get any worse, the whole debacle with Trump being elected, and it was going to be Hillary, and it wasn't Hillary, and the series of the pandemic, and then you could tell a person's political persuasion by the mask. It's just insane stuff. And all the things I thought I would never live through, I never thought would be in our generation, seem to be continuing to happen. So I'm wondering, do you have any insight into this year for the election? Even if you're not going to make a prediction, because you said you wouldn't, Like, what are your thoughts around what's happening?
So here's the thing around, I mean, I have my own emotional views, but in terms of an intuitive, there's too much information out there. You know, the way I work with a company is I know very little about the company. When they ask me a question, they ask the question as if they'd already told me the story. The more anyone knows, the harder it is to intuit. And I also don't retain information. The same beautiful, you know, anomalous brain, severe ADHD, is the same thing that allows me to be so intuitive. I have not very much executive function. But it's not, you know, unless someone asks me a question, I don't really get the information. And when I read it, because of course I'm a curious person, I don't retain it, unfortunately. I mean, I actually go back, and there's certain of my books that are really helpful to me. I actually go back and do my own books because I don't have retention. And I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about both trading and intuition is that there are a lot of different kinds of abilities. My husband's incredibly creative, but I wouldn't trust him to balance a checkbook. You know, he's a screenwriter, he's a TV writer, but his brain doesn't do that. You go to a trader's dinner and everyone's a little, you know, south of the center on the spectrum, and you know, there's a lot of, it's a different brain style. So my political views are completely emotional views, and I actually even forget the names of everybody. I'm the worst person, and the worst person once I'm exposed to information. I think the biggest task in the companies I work for, and one reason I love working for companies where there are a lot of different properties, is that if I'm familiar with something, it's so hard to move aside of my judgment. You know, if I have information, it's so hard to move aside. So for example, I know a lot about medicine now, and a lot of the pro bono work I do is with research. It's very hard when I see 4 symptoms of a disease that I know not to think, oh, it's that, instead of to allow intuition to investigate further and give that information to the doctor.
Got it. So you, for a Wall Street trader, wouldn't give intuition around whether Trump would be elected or not?
I think that well, I mean, I only work with one company from each field. If I'm asked something, I respond to just about everything I'm asked, and of course, I'm sure I've been asked that. But I would say there's way too much information out there. And because I am on my knees praying Trump doesn't get elected, I'm not dispassionate enough. I know too much. I have too much bias. I have too much terror around it to be able to actually read it appropriately. So yes, I always answer the question and I begin even, you know, we have a joke, my oldest client, I have a joke because I begin every single reading. Because my readings are, you know, someone calls and say, okay, do you have a moment? Yes, shoot. But I say, remember, this is only one intuitive's opinion. I've been saying that for over 30 years to one person. I say, sure, I'll tell you what I'm experiencing, but I can be wrong, and I can be wrong. I think that's really important, which is why I only do experts. I don't do civilians. I would never tell someone in a workshop, for example, where I do demonstrate intuition so people can see it, what it is, why I really stay away from anything that's licensed, you know, financial, medical, psychological, anything that's licensed, I stay away from.
It's a fascinating thing for me. You're able to turn this into such an ongoing business. It must be. Is there other people in your family that are, what do you call them, intuitionists?
Intuitive. My brother graduated from Harvard with a degree in business, I guess, and went to Stanford and got a degree in physics, and another from the University of Virginia in business. My one sister's a lawyer. My father's a doctor. His grandfather was a doctor. I'm from just mostly math and science, which tends to be the slightly dispassionate brain. even though I write, I don't really have that verbal brain. I really have more of a mathematical brain. And that lends itself to intuition because it lends itself to dispassionate observation.
So this sixth sense, it says that you train people on how to do this. Do they come to a workshop? Do they come to how do they find out about how to see you go through this training? How is it done?
I do a boot camp once or twice a year. I do lots of free events all over the country. In the morning, and this started during COVID because people were just so desperate. In the morning, I often just in my pajamas go on Instagram and show people how to do it. And I have some little videos, and people exchange readings with each other. Because what's really compelling is when you get detailed, verifiable information about a complete stranger. All you have is an Instagram tag. You don't know what their question is. You don't know who they are. And it's correct. And you get that verification. And when someone does that for you, that's actually less convincing. And it's so important that intuition be an evidence-based practice, not a belief-based practice. I mean, it is an organic capacity that our brain has. Sometimes I go into companies, like I think the Newsweek article mentioned Seagate. Sometimes I go into companies and I train them how to use their intuition, often interdepartmentally, but also how to make space for it in their work. I mean, it's hardest to be intuitive about yourself and about your own focus because you have too much information.
How did you get the Psychic of Wall Street? Like, where did that, the first time you heard it, like, were you on a show? I'm hearing it was Oprah Winfrey, but who was it that called you the Psychic of Wall Street?
Oh my God, it was so long ago. I think it was Newsweek. And I think this actually may be on my website. I think CNN called, I guess found something out about it from the interview and then called for proof. And I gave my investment person permission to show that I had indeed sold everything a couple weeks prior. And I think it was Newsweek. I think it was maybe CNN and Newsweek and kind of a Confluence. As I said, ADHD does not make for great memory, but most of it's on my website.
Why do you think women, at least this is what I read, I could have gotten this wrong, why do you think women are less intuitive than men?
Oh, you absolutely got it right. Because, you can have a woman with a man's brain and a man with a woman's brain, but usually women have more communication between the two hemispheres of their brain, just neurologically, structurally. And so language and feeling are very connected to the data they perceive and to how they experience data. So a male brain tends to be a more math and science brain, a more detached, nonverbal brain, which just happens to be a better brain for intuition. I mean,
I'm emotional. Would that mean I have a female brain with a male body?
It's not so much emotion. It's how you interpret data. Do you weave tales, or do you follow connect the dot linear points? That's really the difference between the organically intuitive brain. And once again, brains are not little hemispheres in jars, of course. But the naturally intuitive brain tends to be that very connect the dot brain, and perhaps not quite as good at reading people, reading emotion, creating fantasy or stories. Like, I'm not creative. I'm not a good creative writer. I'm not a creative person. I'm a very linear person. That tends to be the intuitive brain.
So is intuitive have anything to do with manifestation? And I asked that question because lately for me, my wife calls me probably the last 10 years, she calls me the great manifester. I seem to be able to weirdly think about something that I want to do, pursue it, and then it all just kind of shows up. And it seems like at 54, it's accelerating for me. It's almost like I just decide I'm going to do something, and something else appears in my life, and it falls in place that out of the blue stuff too, really bizarre. And I'm wondering, like, am I filling in the blanks? Because I have had this happen sort of repeatedly in my life, and it's accelerated this idea that I can just decide that I want to. I don't know how to explain that.
I understand what you're saying.
And it's crazy. It happens all the time.
It's a chicken egg question. First of all, I always tease my students. We have this thing at the top of the hour to train our subconscious to be intuitive called the manifestation moment. But I actually hate that word because manifestation just means to make something happen. And I think that the new age overuses that word. You know, we're manifesting. When you put water in the ice box and it becomes ice, you manifest an ice cube. So I love that. It's my favorite word to argue with. Now, two things could be happening. One could be just as you get older, you're putting together your intellect, your intuition, your experience, all of those wonderful gifts you have. They're coming together in ways that allow you to be more effective in the world. That's very possible. It's also possible that you're predicting what opportunities will come up without consciously, cognitively being aware of it, and you are preparing to meet those opportunities as opposed to prepare to meet an opportunity that's a fantasy. I always tell my students, fantasy tools get fantasy results. You know, the every day and every way I'm getting better and better. If you're not getting better and better, believe me, it's not going to help you get better. Real tools create real results. So you may actually just be precognitively knowing that this is coming up. So in here you prepare, and so you're ready to meet it. Or third option is that you're also precognitively, you're saying, oh, I feel like doing this. And so precognitively you make the adjustments. And once again, a lot of precognition is not conscious. I mean, I wouldn't say a lot of traders or business people would say that they're psychics, but they are certainly precognitive. So you may be really very good at identifying those opportunities and managing the scatter. And I think that is why a lot of intuitives actually aren't successful, because they have brains that don't manage scatter. And I think, we see people who are very successful in business for a while, and then their lives expand in ways that they're not structured for, and they tank, or their company tanks, or their fund tanks. And that's an inability to manage scatter, which is so important. I can't manage scatter. I could never do anything. I mean, I could never run a fund myself. I could never probably run a business that I had to run myself, because I don't have the executive function, and I also don't have the filter to manage scatter. So it's one of those three things, or all of those three things.
Well, that may be one of the best explanations I've ever heard of myself.
I'm so glad.
No, I'm actually serious. I've been seeing the same therapist for 24 years and love seeing her. It's been the greatest thing for my relationship with my wife and my family. But managing scatter is definitely something I do. I'm going to have to replay that part of the tape. That was very good. So do I owe you $10,000 a month now? Because it says Newsweek calls you $10,000 a month. Are you still $10,000 a month?
My prices have gone up. That was in 2008.
Oh, really? Really?
But one of the things that I do, and I really believe in this, is there's a portion of my business where I provide a service that helps other people make a lot of money, and I do it for quite a bit of money in very little time. And everything else I give away. I'll often sit down, because it's so interesting to take some, especially if they're in therapy, so you're not responsible if you really upset them or freak them out, because they have a therapist to call. But I find human beings inspirational. I think the easiest life is still difficult. And I love intuitively kind of working with people. My husband always says, we go to all these parties, he puts me in a corner, I sit in my happy place, someone comes over and I rearrange their pieces. It is my favorite thing to do. And I don't charge individuals because I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a physician. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not going to charge for things that I'm not expert in.
Yeah, it's hard to categorize you when you say it that way, because you're obviously getting paid. Well, you're getting paid for what you do, So this
by large companies. I'm being paid by large companies for what I do, but the rest of it, and I don't take new clients. I mean, I had I'm at an age now where my original clients they're retiring.
right.
Some of them. And so I actually recently just took, for the first time in, I guess, 30 years or 25 years, 2 new clients. And it's been amazing because I realize how much the companies that have been working with me for those decades, how much we speak a language of our own.
Welcome to Your Crisis. Can you talk about that book, how that came about? I find that interesting and curious about Welcome to Your Crisis.
So, Welcome to Your Crisis. A lot of my pro bono work has been with diseases like trauma, which I consider a disease, or HIV back in I guess it was the 80s, and that dates me. And Welcome to Your Crisis, where I see people and companies fail is when the toxic load overwhelms the structure's ability to handle it. And so I called, and it's interesting, very intuitive that you picked Welcome to Your Crisis, because Welcome to Your Crisis, more than any other book I've ever written, I called in a favor of every psychiatrist, drug company, neurologist I'd ever worked with, because I thought people in crisis, if I make a mistake, that's not good. But intuition does play a role, and our structure, how we react, does play a role, not just in how we respond to crisis, but it plays a role in our ability to recuperate, and in business as well, when something floods us, when we are really overwhelmed, and for a moment we have no structure. So I thought that there was a real need for this book. So it came from decades of observing people that I had worked with and trained, but also really asking, more educated brains than mine, is this okay? Is this right? Is this concept right? And so there was a lot of weeding because a lot of it wasn't succinctly put enough. I love that book because if you can both manage equilibrium and be flexible, increase your flexibility for change, you have a winning life. No matter what happens, you have a winning life. And those are not easy things to do. And we're not really, especially I think, traditional raising of men, we're not structured to do that. Men are really not allowed to fail. And here again, I may be dating myself, but fail and reinvent. I mean, how many really brilliant CEOs or traders have you known who've lost, who've really lost their backing because it's not integrated. The fact that things you get flooded sometimes. 9/11 happens sometimes. Now a lot of people made money too because they intuitively predicted not that 9/11 would happen so much as that something would happen in the market, but it's so important to be able to be flexible, but also maintain a structure. So hard to do in times of change. And interestingly enough, you brought up COVID and all this confluence of things that happened in your life altogether. I'll bet when you look back, the gifts are still emerging. And that's a wonderful thing because we spend most of our psychological energy and our conscious energy holding on to what we have, which is great, but it doesn't help for adaptive change. The wonderful opportunity in crisis, although God knows I'd like to learn to do it another way, and I work very hard on it, the wonderful opportunity in crisis is that that's ripped away. So if you can take that moment and use it opportunistically, then whether it's in business or in your personal life or in your relationship, you really have a winning formula.
Yeah, the gifts are it's interesting you say that the gifts are still coming from that. There's no question that that's the case. What freaks me out about it is that you've heard that sort of like the youth is lost on the young, right, or whatever, where where you don't know it until you're you're
Wasted.
older.
It's wasted on the young.
Right.
I remembered that.
Right. So for me, I keep experiencing these like, well, this happened to me before, or I was part of this. What the gifts from that are obviously a lot more intuition. Scarily, I think I'm getting it. It's accelerating as I get older. I guess I feel like I wish I would have had it a little sooner, but
that's why young people are pretty, because they're not that smart.
there you go.
It is. Sometimes I do the woulda, shoulda, coulda, but really I realize that, in a fantasy world, I wish I knew, I wish I'd done, I wish I blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, first of all, you're at least a decade younger than I am, so you have a long time ahead of you. But second of all, it's if you had known what you know now when you were younger, you probably still wouldn't have been able to use it.
That's probably
That's why
true.
I think our children never works. We have to watch them walk into walls over and over and over again. I think that's the most painful thing about parenting young adults.
Well, some of us have become these great, at least philosophers, or at least I have perspective now. I find this, my mom is 72. My mom had me when she was 18. And over the weekend, I was watching my mom go through something she's probably went through like 40 times in her life. And some people take from that experience and learn from them, and then some people are doomed to repeat those mistakes over and over again. They don't get anything out of that lesson, which for whatever reason, I don't know whether that happens to people. But I do find myself like overreacting less, right? And paying attention to actually what's being said. And then I come up with my own thesis, I guess you call it intuition, of what's probably going to happen with this, because maybe you see the movie before and you kind of understand human behavior.
That's not intuition. That's awareness. That's intellect engaging with experience. That's your ability to read the environment. Intuition really comes from left field. So if you could have reasoned it, it's probably not intuitive.
Oh, wow.
Listen, that's also a useful skill. I mean, what I really don't like about all of these fringe practices is everything is useful, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I grew up in a time when doctors thought vitamins were quackery. Now, except if you had scurvy, or rickets.
Yeah.
They thought vitamins were, in the 60s, they thought vitamins were quackery.
Well, they also thought smoking was healthful, too.
They also thought hydrogenated oils were better than olive oil. That was my generation. Those facts change. But intuition is really the left field. I refused to eat margarine as a child. It just didn't look like food to me. It looked like a chemical, and I wouldn't eat it. I ate dry toast because, of course, I come from a medical family, so everyone used margarine. It's where the information says one thing often, or you have no exposure to information, which is even better for intuition, and it comes out of the blue. There's no way you could have known it. There's no way to actually prove it's intuitive if you could have figured it out.
Right. So with the election coming up, and is it intuition that I think something bizarre is going to happen? Because there's no way that they're going to just predict that Trump will be the nominee, predict that Biden will make it to the election, maybe Michelle Obama will step in, or maybe Robert Kennedy Jr. will. I mean, is that
unaware of all of this, except for please God, do not let Trump win.
Is this intuition? If I think that it's going to be chaos and that what we think is going to happen isn't going to happen, probably not.
What I think is that you sound like you follow the news.
I do,
and so you probably have too much information to make an accurate intuitive prediction. You know why traders are great intuitives? Because the ones who don't believe in intuition, who haven't experienced it as intuition, although I hate belief and intuition in the same sentence because they have nothing to do with each other. But those who think that they're making logical, well-reasoned decisions, if you really take it apart, in that millisecond where they sell something they were in love with yesterday, hey, that's not a well-reasoned decision. That's pure intuition. That is a flash out of the blue. That is their attention, because what you need to use intuition is to have questions or goals. You have a target, because otherwise it's just lots of information that doesn't go anywhere. Their target is to keep their funds safe. They have a flash that they're not comfortable with this position anymore, and in a moment they get rid of it, and in the right moment they get rid of it. That's intuition. The well-reasoned venture capital, for example, is a little less intuitive. It requires less pure intuition because you get to see the books, you get to see the business. Some intuition, of course, is required for anything, and thankfully we all have some intuition. But that kind of very quick, ER nurses are intuitive. I always tell my students, who's more intuitive, Zen monk or ER nurse? Zen monk, swat fly, don't swat fly. You don't need intuition for that. Triage, triage on a national holiday in an emergency room on a highway. You bet you need intuition for that. And those quick decisions where you don't have enough information, that's how intuitives are formed.
As a former Wall Street trader, I still trade today. Obviously, I have a pretty big firm when it comes to assets, but that's a relative statement, actually. But I'm curious as to what book of yours, if I were a Wall Street trader, would I want to read? What would be the most important book in the series?
Probably How to Rule the World from Your Couch, because the language I use is for a popular market, but being able to pick out precognition, which future telling from, for example, your experience of the company now, being able to place something in time, being able to use all the spokes of the intuitive umbrella is really helpful. Part of what I do is to take systems that have worked in business and that have worked at workshopping them, worked with students, and put them together so that the language is for a popular market, but the system works for anyone.
So if someone wants to follow or learn from you, where would they go to where's the best place for them to follow or learn from you?
LauraDay.com, Lauraday, all spelled traditionally. I'm on Laura Day Intuit at Instagram in my pajamas. You can see my pajamas every morning, just getting people to read each other, getting people to integrate, to awaken the awareness that they have this ability. Maybe a little esoteric feeling for business people. And I do teach something called Bootcamp, which is an intuitive workshop. I teach it once or twice a year. The next one isn't until the end of 2024. I also do a lot of free events at the Core Club, at Soho House, I travel a lot between my husband's schedule and mine. We're in many countries and many coasts. So, if you sign up for my newsletter, you always get, usually at the last minute, I'll be at Soho House, or I'll be at the Core Club, or I'll be in Paris here. And I do a lot of free workshops, and I always get people working, because you can talk till you're blue in the face about prediction and about how much you know about another person or an environment. But when you actually experience that a complete stranger can do that for you, or that you can do that for a complete stranger, then both your intellect and your subconscious says, this is useful, and organically you begin to engage it more.
The next boot camp is into the end of 24?
It isn't, because I have a new book that will be coming out probably at the end of this year. So I don't, and my husband and I kind of take turns, because the modern TV and film writer has to run writer's rooms. So we negotiate who goes where when. Got it.
Laura, thank you for being here. I will say to you, it's interesting. I spent so much time on Wall Street, wanted to work on Wall Street. I know exactly what you're talking about. I wonder if everyone else does, but I know exactly what you're talking about intuition, and how I randomly decided to sell a position, not comfortable, and the next day bad news comes out, or I bought something because I felt like, why is this stagnant? There's something's going to happen here. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get long, and I've been right here. I mean, I don't know if some things probably weren't intuition; they were knowledge. Like one of my best trades ever was this idea that we were going to go from a cell phone to something where you could communicate. And there was a thing called Research in Motion at the time, became a BlackBerry. And one day they made an announcement that I got 2 million subscribers. Stock went up $29 in a single day. And I thought to myself, that's insane.
Pure intuition.
But I got to think that this is going to be a new trend. And something told me to get long that and long Palm Pilot. And the rest is history. That stock was at, I don't know, up 100 within a month. And I don't know, whatever it did, it was to the moon, right? Been wrong millions of times, but there are moments in time where, for some reason, you tell yourself you have to do it, and you don't have any data. You just pull the trigger as a trader.
I always kind of yell at my students because they always want to be so perfect. But really, the point of intuition is you have no idea what you're talking about. So you need to have a target, and then you need to report, and you need to be willing to make a mistake. We're not. Especially in my early career, everyone wanted to make me Guhu Maharaji Day. And I was like, are you kidding? These are brain farts. This is my inability to cross a street. This is ADHD. This is not some big spiritual gift. This is that, thankfully, I'm smart enough and had enough education to be able to use a defective brain appropriately.
What I was going to say to you is that if you watch Billions and you watch Bobby Axelrod and all the traders, and you see them going to therapy and talking to people, and a trader can kind of understand that you're looking for an edge. And Laura, I'm sure that people believe that you're giving them an edge and giving them something to.
They don't believe, they have a record of it.
No. I'm with you.
Believe is such a scary word when we talk about these things, because believe means that you jump into a trampoline that hasn't been weight tested. That's not what someone who's using intuition does. It's really important to know your questions, document your information, and keep track of your accuracy as well as the conditions under which you are less accurate. Like a lot of funds explode 2 years after a divorce, 2 years after cancer, 2 years. It's really interesting. I've observed over time that has nothing to do with a bad trade, really, has something to do with a life event, that their attention moves aside. So belief is really scary. Just like, people are all about feeling good. It doesn't have, a lot of really good things don't feel good. You don't have to believe in something to actually make it successful. You just have to put one foot in front of the other and do it competently.
Yeah, my first fund blew up after my first divorce. So yeah. I'm with you there.
How long after?
I'm with you there. All right, Laura, thank you so. What'd you say? Did you have a question?
How long after?
How long after did that happen? I don't know. A couple years, probably.
Yeah. I probably around 2 years. But I'll tell you something. When you were talking about manifesting before, the reason you can manifest now, the reason that it is probably not going to blow up for you now, is that that when there's a life event, you need to take care of it. You don't know that when you're young.
For sure. I definitely want to get off the air with you because I want to ask you a question. So stay there for a second. Laura, thank you so much. I almost know we're going to have you back as long as you're willing to do it. Even though you don't like Trump, that's okay. I like you.
I'm going to explain to you real quick. Don't be rolling yet. There's a reason for it.